welcome back. Or if this is your first night here, welcome to Sleepy Voyage. It's alright to arrive here feeling a little tired, as if the day asked more of you than it should have. Nothing needs your attention now. Nothing is waiting to be solved. Tonight, this small town is already resting. The streets are quiet. Snow settles gently where footsteps were earlier, and warm lights glow behind windows that have closed for the night. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to follow a story. Just listen, as if you were standing still for a moment, breathing slowly, while Christmas Eve unfolds softly around you, one calm moment at a time. Before we begin our journey to this quiet refuge, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you ensure that this shelter will always be here waiting for you on difficult nights. If tonight's story brings you peace, leave your support. This space exists because you return to it, because you allow it to exist for you when you need it most. So let us go there now, to the small town, to the quiet street, to the soft glow of Christmas Eve settling over everything like a blanket someone has pulled up to your chin. The snow falls on the empty street without sound, each flake descending through the darkness as if it has forgotten how to hurry, as if the entire sky has agreed that tonight requires gentleness. The street is narrow, lined with houses that have stood here for decades, perhaps longer, their windows glowing with light, the color of honey, of amber, of something warm you might cup in your hands. It is late, later than most people stay awake on a night like this. The town has already tucked itself in, already drawn its curtains and turned down its lights, already surrendered to the particular quiet that settles over small places when the world outside stops demanding attention. There is no traffic, no voices, only the snow and the stillness and the soft light pressing against window glass. One house sits at the corner where the street bends. A small house, modest, with shutters painted a blue that has faded over years into something gentler than the color it once was. In the front window, a single light glows, not bright, just enough to mark the space as inhabited, as alive, as holding something warm inside against the cold night pressing close. The light in that window comes from a lamp, an old lamp with a shade that has yellowed slightly with age. The kind of lamp that has sat on the same table for so many years, it has become part of the room's breathing, part of its quiet existence. The light it casts is soft, diffused, landing on surfaces with the tenderness of something that knows how to rest. Around the lamp, the room holds itself in stillness. There is a couch, its fabric worn smooth, in the places where bodies have sat for years. A bookshelf against one wall, spines aligned but not perfectly, the slight disorder of a collection that has been used, read, returned too many times. A small table near the window, a rug that has faded from deep burgundy to something closer to rose. The walls are painted a cream color that seems to absorb the lamplight and give it back warmer, gentler, more patient. There are pictures on those walls, framed photographs whose details cannot quite be made out in the dim light. But their presence suggests memory, continuity, the accumulation of years lived in this space. The room smells faintly of pine. A small Christmas tree stands in the corner, no taller than a person, decorated with lights that are not lit now, with ornaments that catch the lamp's glow and turn it into small points of color. Beneath the tree, no gifts. Just the tree itself, standing there because it has stood there every year, because some rituals persist even when their original purpose has faded. Outside, the snow continues its descent. It has been falling for hours now, since late afternoon when the light began to fail and the sky turned that particular shade of grey that promises more snow, that settles in and stays. The street has disappeared beneath several inches of fresh powder. unmarked except for a single set of footprints leading from the house to the mailbox and back again, already beginning to fill. The cold presses close to the windows but does not enter. Inside, the air is warm, held at a temperature that requires no thought, no adjustment, simply maintained by the house's old furnace humming somewhere in the basement, a sound so constant it becomes part of the silence rather than breaking it. On the table near the window sits a cup. The cup is white ceramic, plain, with a hairline crack running down one side that has been there so long it no longer matters. The cup still holds the faint warmth of tea drunk an hour ago, or perhaps 2 hours ago. Time has become difficult to track tonight. It slides past without marking itself, without demanding acknowledgement. The sounds in this space are minimal but distinct. The soft tick of a clock on the mantel, marking seconds with patient insistence. The occasional creak of wood settling, the house adjusting to temperature shifts so slight they would escape notice in daylight. The muffled whisper of snow against the window glass, so quiet it might be imagined. Between these sounds, silences open up. Not empty silences, but silences with weight, with texture, with the quality of presence. The kind of silence that holds space for thought without demanding it. That allows the mind to wander without requiring it to arrive anywhere in particular. The furnace hums, stops. The house holds its breath. Then the furnace hums again, resuming its quiet work of maintaining warmth against the cold night pressing close outside. The air in the room carries a subtle weight, a density that comes from warmth held inside closed spaces, from stillness undisturbed for hours. It is not thick or heavy, but present, noticeable, like something you might lean against if you needed support. The temperature is precisely calibrated without effort, the result of a thermostat set years ago and never adjusted. The house having learned over time how to maintain this exact level of warmth, not hot, not cool, somewhere in between, where the body can forget about temperature entirely and simply exist. Against the skin, this air feels neutral, unobtrusive, allowing the mind to settle elsewhere, to focus on other things or on nothing at all. It carries the faint scent of dust and old paper, and the clean smell of snow seeping in through invisible gaps around window frames. It carries memory without weight, presence without demand. The rug beneath bare feet would feel soft, worn down by years of footsteps, until its pile has compressed into something that no longer pushes back, but simply accepts weight, holds it gently, releases it when lifted. The smell of pine from the small tree mingles with something else. The ghost of coffee brewed hours ago, the pot now empty and cold on the kitchen counter in the next room. The faint must of old books, pages that have been opened and closed countless times, that carry within them the particular scent of paper aging slowly, gracefully, without complaint. There is no smell of cooking, no dinner prepared tonight. Perhaps something simple was eaten earlier, standing at the counter, not quite a meal but sufficient. A piece of toast, some cheese, an apple cut into slices and eaten one at a time while looking out the kitchen window at the snow beginning to fall. The smell of the house itself underneath everything. Old wood, plaster, the accumulated scent of years lived within these walls. Not unpleasant, familiar. The smell of home, or what home becomes when you have occupied a space long enough that your presence has seeped into its surfaces. A figure moves through the doorway from the kitchen, not quickly. There is no hurry in this movement, no urgency pressing from behind. Just the slow, deliberate motion of someone who has nowhere else to be, nothing else requiring attention, who has finally allowed himself to stop. His name is Thomas. He is 53 years old. though this fact matters less than it once did, the number having become simply a marker of time past rather than a definition of what he should be or do. He wears old jeans, soft with washing, and a flannel shirt in dark blue and grey checks. The kind of shirt that has been worn so many times, it no longer feels like clothing, but like a second skin. His hair is grey at the temples, still dark everywhere else, cut short in a style that requires no maintenance, no thought. His face carries lines that suggest someone who has smiled more than frowned, though there is something in his eyes tonight that speaks of tiredness, of the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical labor, but from the accumulated weight of carrying things that cannot be set down easily. Thomas crosses to the window and stands there, looking out at the snow. His hands rest at his sides, empty. He has the habit of touching the edge of the curtain when he stands here, his fingers finding the fabric and holding it gently, not pulling it aside to see better, but simply making contact, anchoring himself to something physical. He does this now, his fingers brushing the curtain's edge, feeling the slight texture of the fabric, the coolness of it near the window where the cold outside presses close. His thumb moves across the material in small circles, an unconscious gesture repeated countless times, a small ritual the body performs while the mind is elsewhere. Outside, the street lies empty. No cars pass, no one walks. The neighboring houses show fewer lights now than they did an hour ago. People are sleeping, or preparing to sleep, or sitting in their own quiet rooms, doing whatever people do when the world has released its hold and allowed them to simply be. Thomas breathes slowly, in through his nose, out through slightly parted lips. Not a conscious breathing exercise, not an attempt to calm himself. Just the natural rhythm of a body that has been holding tension all day and has finally been given permission to let some of it go. He had not planned to be alone tonight. Or perhaps he had, in the way that one plans things without consciously deciding, by making choices that lead inevitably to a particular outcome, while telling oneself that other outcomes were equally possible. His daughter had called 3 days ago, her voice carrying the bright determination of someone trying to make things work, trying to bridge distances that have grown gradually over years until they can no longer be crossed easily. She had invited him to spend Christmas with her family, with her husband and their 2 children, in the house they bought last year 2 states away. Thomas had thanked her, had said he would think about it, had meant to call back, but somehow the days had slipped past, and now it was Christmas Eve, and the moment for accepting invitations had passed, had closed quietly like a door shutting somewhere in another room, noticed only in retrospect. He had not wanted to impose. That is what he tells himself. Had not wanted to disrupt their family celebration with his presence, his quietness, the way he sometimes withdraws into himself and cannot quite return when conversation flows around him. Better to let them have their holiday together, complete and whole, without needing to accommodate him. But standing here now, looking out at the empty street, he recognizes this reasoning as the comfortable lie it is. The truth sits deeper, harder to name. Something about the effort required to be present, to perform the role of grandfather and father and guest, to maintain the energy necessary for family gatherings when what he wants most is simply to be still. On the small table beside the lamp, a photograph rests in a simple wooden frame. The photograph shows a woman standing in this same room, younger than Thomas is now, perhaps 40, her hair dark and pulled back, her smile genuine but with something held in reserve, some privacy maintained even in photographs meant for family albums. Her name was Margaret. She had been his wife for 22 years before the cancer took her, 5 years ago this past autumn. The photograph was taken on Christmas Eve, though which Christmas Eve Thomas can no longer remember. They blur together in memory, all those years of lights and trees and meals prepared and eaten. All those quiet evenings after guests had left or before they arrived, when it was just the two of them in this house, in this room, maintaining the rituals of the season because that is what one does. Thomas does not look at the photograph often. It sits where it has always sat, part of the room's furniture now, noticed only when he allows himself to notice. Tonight he glances at it briefly, his eyes finding her face in the lamplight, then moving away again without lingering. There is no pain in this glance, or rather, the pain has been metabolized over years into something gentler, something closer to a persistent ache than a sharp wound. He misses her. This fact exists as constant background, the way tinnitus exists for some people, always present but not always demanding attention. He moves away from the window, crosses to the couch, sits down slowly. The couch receives his weight with a familiar give, the cushions compressed into the exact shape of his body from years of sitting in this same spot. He leans back, his head finding the place where it always rests, his shoulders settling into the worn fabric. From here, the room looks different. The lamp's light falls differently when viewed from this angle, creating shadows in corners that from the window appeared evenly lit. The Christmas tree becomes more prominent, its unlit lights catching the lamplight and holding it in small points. Thomas closes his eyes, not to sleep, not yet, just to rest them, to give his mind a moment without visual input, to let the day's accumulated images fade slightly before new ones replace them. Behind his eyelids, colors shift and move, the afterimage of light and shadow, the mind processing what the eyes have seen. He does not resist this, does not try to make his mind empty or still. He simply lets it do what it needs to do, trusting that eventually it will quiet on its own. The house settles around him. A creak from upstairs, some beam adjusting to temperature. The furnace cycling off, its absence noticed only briefly before the silence closes over the space it occupied. Outside, the snow continues falling, patient and persistent, accumulating without effort or intent. Thomas opens his eyes. The room remains unchanged. The lamp still glows. The tree still stands in its corner. The photograph of Margaret still rests on the table, her smile fixed in that moment decades past when someone had pointed a camera and asked her to smile, and she had complied, because that is what you do when someone asks. He reaches for the cup on the table, the one that held tea hours ago. The ceramic is cool now against his palm. He lifts it, brings it close to his face, smells the faint ghost of chamomile still clinging to the inside. He does not drink from it. There is nothing left to drink. He simply holds it, the cup's weight and shape familiar, grounding. Then he sets it down again, carefully, in exactly the spot it occupied before. This small action completed, he settles back into the couch, his body finding its familiar position, his breathing slowing further. The clock on the mantel marks time with its steady tick. Thomas has lived with this clock for so long that normally he does not hear it, his mind having learned to filter the sound as irrelevant background. But tonight, in the deep quiet, each tick becomes noticeable again, each small sound marking another second past. Another moment added to the accumulation of moments that comprise a life. He thinks about time, not philosophically, not in the abstract way people think about time when they are trying to understand its nature or meaning. Just practically, concretely, the way one thinks about a resource that was once abundant and has gradually become scarce without one quite noticing, until suddenly you look up and realize how much has gone. 53 years. It had seemed like so many when he was younger. when 53 was an age inhabited by other people, older people, people who had their lives figured out and knew what they were doing. Now, inhabiting that number himself, he recognizes it as just another point on a continuum, no more significant than 47 or 61. Just the place where he happens to be standing right now. Margaret used to say that Christmas Eve was her favorite night of the year. Not Christmas itself, with its obligations and expectations and the pressure of gifts and meals and family dynamics, but Christmas Eve, when anticipation still hung in the air, when possibility remained open, when the actual holiday with its inevitable small disappointments and large efforts had not yet arrived to replace imagination with reality. She would insist they keep Christmas Eve quiet. No parties, no guests. Just the two of them, and later their daughter when she was young, sitting in this room with the tree lights on and music playing softly and nothing required except presence. That was her word for it. Presence. The act of being fully in a moment without reaching forward to what comes next or backward to what has passed. Thomas had not understood this preference at first. He was someone who liked events, gatherings, the energy of multiple conversations happening simultaneously in a crowded room. He had thought Christmas Eve was meant to be a prelude, something to endure before the main event. But Margaret had been patient with his not understanding, had simply maintained the tradition year after year until gradually, without his noticing the transition, it had become his preference too. Now, sitting here alone on Christmas Eve with the house quiet around him, he recognizes that she had been teaching him something. How to be still. How to let a moment simply exist without needing to be filled or improved or made into something other than what it was. The snow outside is accumulated on the windowsill, a small ridge of white pressed against the glass. Thomas watches it, noting how the individual flakes are no longer distinguishable, how they have merged into a continuous mass, each one losing its discrete identity to become part of something larger. There is something in this observation that feels important, though he cannot quite articulate why. Something about how individual moments accumulate into days, days into years, years into a life. How the boundaries between moments dissolve until you can no longer point to exactly where one thing ended and another began. He had not meant to spend Christmas Eve thinking about time and loss and accumulation. Had not meant to spend it thinking at all. He had imagined, vaguely, that he would watch television or read or perhaps just sleep early, grateful for a day with no demands. But the mind goes where it needs to go. This is something else he has learned, particularly in the years since Margaret died. You cannot force the mind to be anywhere other than where it insists on being. You can distract it temporarily, redirect it briefly, but eventually it returns to whatever it needs to process, whatever it needs to understand or accept or simply acknowledge. Upstairs, in the room that used to be his daughter's bedroom and is now a guest room that rarely hosts guests, the bed is made with clean sheets. Thomas had changed them 2 days ago, part of the flurry of preparation that preceded his decision not to invite anyone, not to go anywhere, not to make this Christmas anything other than another quiet day. He thinks about that empty room now, the bed waiting, the lamp on the nightstand, the window that faces east, toward where the sun will rise tomorrow morning if the snow has stopped and the clouds have cleared. He thinks about climbing the stairs, eventually, getting ready for bed, lying down in the room he shares with memory and silence. But not yet. He is not ready yet to end this day, to surrender to whatever tomorrow brings. There is something about this particular stillness, this particular quality of quiet, that he wants to hold a little longer. In the kitchen, the clock above the sink reads 11:40. Thomas does not need to look at it to know this. Some internal sense, tracks time even when he is not consciously aware of doing so. Some part of him always knowing approximately what hour it is, what part of the day or night currently holds sway. Christmas Day approaches. In 20 minutes, it will be officially Christmas, though this designation matters less than it might in other circumstances, in other years. The day itself will come and go. The sun will rise and set. The hours will pass in their inevitable sequence, and Thomas will move through them as he moves through any other day, attending to whatever small needs present themselves, maintaining the basic requirements of existence. There had been a time when Christmas meant something more, when his daughter was young and belief in magic still held, when the house filled with anticipation and barely contained excitement, and the morning brought squeals of delight and wrapping paper scattered across the floor, and the particular joy of watching someone open something you chose, specifically for them. Those days have passed. His daughter has her own children now, who wake in their own house 2 states away to their own Christmas morning, their own rituals and traditions. As it should be, this is how life moves forward, through generations, each one creating its own version of what matters, what to keep, what to release. Thomas shifts slightly on the couch, adjusting his position, seeking a comfort that is always temporary, always requiring minor adjustments. His back aches slightly, a dull, persistent reminder of years spent working construction, of lifting and carrying and bending in ways the body eventually protests. Nothing serious, just the accumulated wear of a body used thoroughly, consistently, without particular care for its long-term maintenance. He reaches up, presses his fingers against the back of his neck, kneads the muscle there gently. The tension resists at first, then slowly begins to release, the tissue softening under sustained pressure. He does this for a minute, maybe 2, his attention focused on the sensation, on the small ache giving way to something slightly less. Then he stops, his hands dropping back to his lap, the temporary relief sufficient for now. Outside, a sound, faint, distant, the rumble of a snowplow somewhere several streets away, clearing roads that will be covered again by morning, maintaining the futile battle against accumulation that defines winter in small northern towns. The sound rises and falls, moving farther away, then disappears entirely, leaving only the silence and the soft whisper of falling snow. Thomas realizes he is thirsty, not desperately so, but enough to notice, enough to require attention. He considers getting up, going to the kitchen, filling a glass with water from the tap. But the effort required seems disproportionate to the need. The couch holds him gently. The room embraces him with its familiar warmth and light. Getting up would mean breaking this particular quality of stillness, this particular arrangement of comfort. So he remains seated, the thirst acknowledged but not immediately addressed, filed away as something to attend to later, or perhaps not at all. The body has ways of adjusting to minor discomforts, of accommodating them until they no longer register as problems requiring solutions. This is something he has learned about being alone. How much can be deferred, postponed, deemed non-essential. When Margaret was alive, her needs and his needs intertwined, creating a constant low-level negotiation of who needed what when. Now, alone, he answers only to himself, and himself proves remarkably flexible, remarkably willing to simply let things be. The tree in the corner draws his attention. He has not looked at it directly since sitting down, has allowed it to exist in peripheral vision, part of the room's overall composition but not its focus. Now he lets his eyes rest on it fully, taking in the particular way the branches spread, the placement of ornaments, the small imperfections that mark it as real rather than artificial, They had bought this tree together, he and Margaret, many years ago when artificial trees first became convincing. When you could choose between real and fake without social judgment attached to either choice. She had preferred real. Liked the smell, the tradition of going to select one, the slight hassle of needles dropping and watering required. But she had been practical too, had recognized that at some point the hassle might outweigh the benefit. So they had bought this artificial one together, a compromise between tradition and convenience, agreeing that it would serve for years, that they would not need to keep choosing, keep buying, keep hauling a new tree home each season. That conversation feels very far away now, like something that happened to different people, younger people, people who still believed in the possibility of long-term planning, of choices that would remain valid indefinitely. Thomas closes his eyes again. This time, sleep pulls at the edges of his consciousness, soft fingers reaching up from wherever sleep waits during waking hours. He does not resist these fingers, does not try to maintain alertness. But neither does he surrender fully. He exists in the space between, aware but not fully present, resting but not yet asleep. Images drift through his mind. The street outside, white with snow. Margaret's smile in the photograph. His daughter's face when she was 8 years old, gap-toothed and delighted on Christmas morning. The kitchen at Thanksgiving, crowded with family and food and conversation layered so thick you could not track individual threads. The hospital room where Margaret spent her last weeks, its walls pale green, its window facing a parking lot. These images do not linger. They appear and dissolve, one replacing another without narrative logic, without emotional weight demanding processing, just memories surfacing and submerging, the mind sorting through its archives without agenda. The clock continues its steady marking. 11:50 now, or perhaps 11:55. The day ending, the new one preparing to begin. The arbitrary designation of midnight approaching, as if time cares about the labels humans assign to its passage, as if anything fundamental changes when one date becomes another. Thomas opens his eyes. The room remains. The lamp still glows with its warm, patient light. The snow still falls beyond the window, visible in the small space between curtain and glass. Everything continues as it was. Nothing has changed except the time, and even that change matters less than the continuity it marks. He thinks about going to bed, about climbing the stairs, washing his face, changing into pajamas, lying down in the dark bedroom with its familiar sounds and smells. About letting this day finally end, releasing it to whatever place days go when they have been completed. But something keeps him here on the couch. Some quality of this particular moment that has not yet finished with him, or that he has not yet finished with. Something about sitting in the warm lamplight on Christmas Eve, alone but not lonely, tired but not ready to surrender to sleep. The word lonely appears in his mind and he examines it briefly, testing its accuracy. Is he lonely? The word suggests a want, a lack, something missing that should be present. He does not think that is what he feels. There is solitude here, yes, aloneness, the absence of other people, but not loneliness in the way he understands the word. Loneliness had come in the first months after Margaret died, a physical presence, heavy and persistent, pressing down on his chest whenever he woke in the empty bed, whenever he came home to the silent house, whenever he had something to say and turned to speak and found no one there to receive the words. That loneliness had been acute, painful, demanding attention like a wound that would not heal. But gradually, with the slow patience of water wearing stone, it had softened, not disappeared, just changed into something different. Something more like a permanent companion than an intruder. Something he had learned to accommodate rather than resist. Now, sitting here in the lamplight, he recognizes that what he feels is not loneliness, but something else. Something closer to solitude chosen rather than imposed. A quietness he has made space for because the alternative, filling the silence with activity or distraction or the presence of people who would require him to be other than what he is in this moment, feels more exhausting than the solitude itself. Outside, the snow continues its patient accumulation. The street has disappeared entirely now beneath the white blanket, all edges softened, all distinctions erased. The neighboring houses have gone dark. No lights show in any window except his own. The whole town sleeps or pretends to sleep, observing the ritual of Christmas Eve, participating in the collective agreement that this night requires rest, preparation, the gathering of energy for tomorrow's expectations. Thomas watches the snow through the window, his eyes tracking individual flakes as they descend through the cone of light cast by the street lamp halfway down the block. Each flake falls differently, taking its own path through the air, subject to currents and eddies imperceptible to human observation. Yet they all arrive at the same place eventually, settling onto the street or the roofs or the bare branches of trees, adding their small weight to the accumulating mass. There is something hypnotic in this watching, something that stills the mind's constant motion, its endless generation of thought and worry and plan, just following the snow as it falls, tracking its descent, noting how the light catches it, how it disappears into darkness or lands in illuminated spaces. Simple observation requiring no interpretation, no response, no action beyond the watching itself. The furnace clicks on again, its familiar rumble rising from the basement. Warm air beginning to flow through the vents placed strategically throughout the house. Thomas feels the subtle change in temperature, the gentle current of air moving across his skin. The house maintaining its essential function: shelter, warmth, protection against the cold pressing clothes outside. He had bought this house 30 years ago. He and Margaret together, young and newly married and full of plans for what they would build here. A life, a family, a collection of memories that would accumulate over decades until the house itself became inseparable from those memories. Until you could not walk through a room without encountering something that had happened there. Some moment preserved in the unchanging architecture. They had imagined growing old here together, had pictured themselves as elderly people sitting in this same room, perhaps in these same spots, looking back on all the years that had filled the space between then and now. That future had seemed certain, inevitable, the natural progression of things. But that future had not come to pass, or rather, half of it had. Thomas had become the elderly person they had imagined, but he had become that person alone, sitting in a room that held memories of her everywhere, but her physical presence nowhere. He does not dwell on this discrepancy between imagined future and actual present. It simply exists as fact, as the reality he inhabits now, as the context within which his current life unfolds. Dwelling accomplishes nothing. The past cannot be changed. The future remains uncertain. Only the present moment offers any ground to stand on, and even that ground shifts constantly, each second replacing the one before. Midnight arrives without fanfare. The clock on the mantel ticks past 12. The mechanism inside making no distinction between this transition and any other. Treating it with the same indifference it shows every other second of every other day. No bells ring, no fireworks explode. The snow continues falling. The lamp continues glowing. Thomas continues sitting. It is Christmas Day now, officially. according to the arbitrary human measurement of time that divides existence into discrete units and assigns them names and significance. But nothing feels different. The room remains unchanged. His body holds the same weariness it held 5 minutes ago. The street outside continues its quiet accumulation of snow. Thomas acknowledges the transition with a small internal nod, a recognition that yes, the calendar has advanced, a new day has technically begun. But he does not allow this acknowledgement to carry more weight than it deserves. It is simply another moment in the continuous flow of moments, marked by convention but not fundamentally different from what came before or what will follow. He should probably go to bed. This thought arrives not as an urgent directive, but as a gentle suggestion, an observation about what most people would do at this hour on this night. The day has been long. Today will require energy for whatever small tasks it brings. The body needs rest. The mind needs the temporary obliteration of consciousness that sleep provides. And yet he remains on the couch, held there by something he cannot quite name. Some quality of this moment that has not yet completed itself, that still holds something requiring his presence, his attention. Even if he cannot identify what that something is, perhaps it is simply the reluctance to end, to close the book on Christmas Eve, to surrender to sleep and wake into Christmas Day with its different quality, its different expectations. Perhaps there is something about this particular quietness, this particular stillness, that he wants to preserve a little longer before letting it go. The lamp continues its faithful work, casting the same warm light it has cast for hours, for years, asking nothing, requiring only occasional replacement of its bulb, otherwise existing in patient permanence, illuminating this room night after night, whether anyone is present to receive its light or not. Thomas looks at the lamp now, really looks at it, seeing not just the light it provides, but the object itself. The brass base tarnished slightly despite periodic cleaning. The yellowed shade with its small tear near the seam that Margaret had meant to repair but never did. The cord running down to the outlet, slightly frayed near the plug. Another thing that should probably be attended to but has been safely ignored for months, maybe years. This lamp will probably outlive him, will continue sitting on this table long after he is gone, lighting other rooms or other people's rooms, serving its simple function until finally some internal component fails and it becomes trash to be discarded, thrown away without ceremony, its years of service forgotten. The thought does not sadden him particularly. It simply exists as observation, as recognition of the way objects persist, while the lives they illuminate come and go. Each one temporary, each one believing in its own permanence, until suddenly it ends. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hums, another constant background sound that normally escapes notice, but in this deep quiet becomes audible, present part of the house's symphony of maintenance. All these machines working to preserve temperature, to maintain comfort, to create an environment where human life can proceed without constant attention to survival. Thomas thinks about his daughter waking tomorrow morning, today morning, Christmas morning, her children thundering down the stairs, still young enough to believe in the magic, in the overnight appearance of gifts, in the benevolent figure who traverses the world in a single night delivering rewards to good children, her husband making coffee, starting breakfast preparations, the house filling with the particular energy of family celebration. She will call later. She always calls on Christmas Day, her voice bright with determination to bridge the distance, to include him in their celebration even though he is not physically present. He will tell her about his quiet evening, his early bedtime, will ask about the children and their gifts and the meal they ate, The conversation will be warm, genuine, and underneath it, both of them will feel the slight sadness of separation. The awareness that this is not how either of them imagined their relationship would be configured. But this too is simply what is, rather than what might be wished. Distance has accumulated gradually between them, not from lack of love, but from the natural drift of lives moving in different directions, subject to different currents, arriving at different destinations. He has his life here, in this house, in this town. She has hers there, in her new city, with her new family. Both lives are real, valid, complete. They simply no longer overlap as extensively as they once did. Thomas shifts again on the couch, his body seeking some position that might be more comfortable, some arrangement of limbs and spine that would allow complete relaxation. No such position exists. Comfort is always approximate, always temporary, always requiring adjustment. This is one of the small disappointments of having a body, its persistent demands, its refusal to simply cooperate fully with what the mind wants, which in this moment is simply to rest without distraction, to exist without the constant low-level awareness of minor discomforts. He settles for good enough, leans back, his head finding the spot on the couch, back worn smooth by years of contact, his shoulders dropping slightly, his hands resting.